or working on the cafe culture. We all united and joined together to work on the leisure and tourism topic as well as the employment topic. As regards leisure and tourism, we studied in depth place branding and promotion, destination management and hospitality. As regards the employment issue, we studied in depth skills and apprenticeships and business support. Also, as part of this work, a town centre survey was launched in late October 2020. This proved to be very successful with 327 responses, and the overall responses were positive in tone, the vast majority saying that our COVID measures were good. There is much that our residents value about our borough, namely the community, shops, market and country park. There is a detailed final report that members of the public can access and study online also. Some highlights from this study briefly are as follows. The business survey had 22 responses, which is actually considered to be comparatively good. We also held a helpful bid business improvement district and town estate meeting in January this year, chaired by Councillor Binlos and the other key providers and partner organisations, sharing and swapping information linked to all our research. As regards the business grants, I'm pleased to say in total over £10.7 million were given out to over 800 eligible businesses in the first lockdown, and then another 7.3 million paid out to 600 businesses since the second lockdown in November 2020. Many businesses were thus saved from closure, of course, and so these grants were an outstanding success and something that Melton Council and the wider public can be very proud of. Most important are the conclusions from this report, namely that more resources are required, particularly in the form of financial support to fund and develop opportunities. It would also be appropriate for dedicated officer time to be funded, thus freeing up other usually senior officers to get on with their normal work caseloads, which are usually considerable in their own rights. Most of all, it was thought that Melton needs an ambitious response to support local businesses, including the leisure and tourism sectors, to help recover from the effects of the pandemic lockdowns, such as the boosting of the nighttime economies and the supporting of the business, the taxi businesses, for example. The 5 recommendations are actually at the back of the report, as well as the front presenting paperwork, of course, so you can clearly see. Anyway, thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jeannie. That was quite comprehensive. Are there any questions from cabinet members? Looking round. No, I don't think there are any. Jeannie, it falls to me to move the recommendations at 2122, 2A, B, C, D, E, which is long. It's just been a huge amount of work done here. A little bit sorry that Rob isn't here to present it, but hey ho, that's the way it goes, isn't it, sometimes? But thanks to Rob and thanks for everyone involved in the group. You know, I've read it well, and looking at the group pictures now, and it's quite interesting enough. I just happened to be at the County Council Cabinet meeting yesterday, and they were talking about the recent survey that had been taken place on the new traffic schemes that got coming for Melton Mowbray. That went through their cabinet yesterday, and some of that fits into walking and cycling. I'm looking at that section there, and they were very keen to mention that, and our own councillor Posnet was very keen to point that out too as well, that there are things, even in economy, I mean, there's just huge opportunities there, isn't it? Let's be honest, and we all know that. If only the weather could be like this for 6 months a year, it wouldn't need any help, it would happen, wouldn't it? But that's, you know, to me, to be honest, that's one of the main drivers of coming out of COVID, actually, the evening economy and the town centre. Town centre is going to change, there's no doubt about that. And I think they're going to become even more vibrant in couple with the cafe culture. The headlines you've picked up on are, you know, I fully support. I'm just turning back the pages. The retailer mark and the place branding and promotion, destination management, hospitality, skills, apprenticeship, business support. A huge amount of work. And it goes continuing over of all the work you've done. Nothing short of praise for the work scrutiny you've done on this. So thank you very, very much. So, I turn to look to Councillor Freer to second, please. Now, are there any other questions at all before we go any further? No? Okay, so I ask you to all raise your hands if you're in favour. I think that can be recorded as unanimous, please. Thank you very much. We move over the page now. As said for the third time, you have been busy. Scrutiny, task and finish group review of the Melton Mowbray bid improvement final report. Councillor Freer, I think you've got something to say before we start on this.
Thank you. Yes, it was amiss of me. I should have put forward an interest in the bid because I am a member of the bid board. So if we can clarify what that it's just a special interest. Yeah.
Very much. Councillor Cumbers, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I presume you've all read the report, so I'll go straight into. I'm happy to bring this to Cabinet. I believe our recommendations for the bid are sound. You know, we've given a lot of thought to them, and I think if you really look at those recommendations, I think that they will lead to a better relationship between the council and the bid, and the idea of enlarging the bid district, I think, is also sound. Somebody was pointing out quite recently that businesses within town centres, and that will be the same with Melton, business, some are disappearing and they'll become residential. So it makes sense for a bid district to be larger, still within the town. In Melton, we could still have, and then perhaps to take in some of the industries and the different businesses, and I hope that they'll take that on board. Of course, all we can do is make recommendations, you know, but I hope they will listen, because the bid is not a standalone organisation. It's very much part of the town, and it's important that we all know that the bid and the council absolutely work together. So. So what we're looking for, of course, is your endorsement, really, of our recommendations. Any comments will be very welcome. We won't be changing anything, but we're happy to sort of listen to your comments. And it's just quite possible that we could change something, but that will be for scrutiny, sort of outside of this meeting. But so if there are any comments or questions, I'd be glad to hear them.
Turn to Councillor Freer to propose the recommendation.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'd like to propose the report. Thank Pat very much for the report and the information in it. I think the recommendations are good things to put forward to the bid. The first one, looking at the relationship between the bid and the council, I think is very important, and I think it's something that we can work on to ensure that we are supportive of them, so that they know that they are supported, so they feel able to come to us with the information that we feel we need transparency on. And I'd be happy to put myself forward to work on that with Pranali, to meet outside of the actual bid board itself, so that we can get together and try to foster that relationship, and look and share with them in more detail the report and the recommendations that you've identified. So thank you for that, and happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Freer. I'm delighted to second the recommendations as well. Are there any other comments? Okay, so we turn to the recommendation, and I've lost my place. It's recommendation on page 4, 2122, 23A, B, C. All those in favour, raise your hands. Unanimous, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pat. And I'm not going to say you're going to be putting your feet up, but you've done a lot of hard work the past few months, and I'm sure you're moving on to your next projects. Yeah, thank you very much. Moving on to item 5, housing revenue account, 2020-21 provisional year-end position. I looked at the Assistant Director for Housing Management to summarise the report, please.
That's actually me, Leader. Okay. So the report sets out the provisional outturn for the housing revenue account services for the financial year 2020-21, and it compares the outturn with the original budget, which was set at rent setting time at the council's meeting in February 2020, as well as the latest approved estimate, which incorporates in-year approvals. You'll see the detail in Appendix A, which includes budget holder comments on those variations which are significant, being those a plus or minus £10,000. The overall position is an underspend against the budget of just over 1 million, which is primarily due to the large underspend on repairs and maintenance, with work being limited as a result of the pandemic. And this results in an increase to the reserves of 1.3 million, and that's increased over the underspend as a result of bringing the working balance back to its approved level of £750,000. You can see in the report that the position on the reserves is set out there. However, the housing revenue account business plan, which is currently being developed, will provide more detail on the suitability of these levels compared to the commitments needed to improve and manage the stock moving forward. Also in the report is the provisional outturn on the capital programme, and that shows a similar position with large proportion of spend carried forward into 2021-22, again as a result of the impact of the pandemic on repairs work and access to properties. Obviously, this is all subject to audit, which we've yet to get a timescale for, and I'll pick up more of that when we move on to a later report on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Garden. I turn to Councillor de Burl, portfolio holder for corporate finance resources, to move the recommendation. Provide any further introduction.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dawn, for your report. My comments remain much as they have been for some time. That is that the picture remains uncertain and will remain so until a proper and comprehensive assessment and costed business and action plan is produced and put into place. Clearly, the longer this takes to achieve, the bigger the challenge will be. Climate change is likely also to have a large impact on this service area, but to what extent we don't know. We need this clarity if we are to move forward. Because of that, it was particularly pleasing to receive the report from our Director from Housing Management that the contracts have been signed off and the work will begin very soon on producing the analysis that's needed to determine what the condition of our stock is. And we look forward to seeing that output. As to the body of the report, the main consideration for me is shown at 5.6.1, which is on page 43, or at least page 43 that I have. Which shows that in the accounting period, there's an underspend of circa 2.4 million on maintenance projects. And whilst 5.1 to 5.3.4 shows that there were mitigating circumstances, the clear message is that we have a massive hill to climb to achieve our corporate objectives, which we set for 2020-2024. So, but yes, Chairman, I'm happy to move on the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burl. I'm very pleased to second. It's important that we have these updates on the HRA to ensure that we can make informed decisions, no doubt about that. You rightly point out the underspend, Councillor Burl. I picked that one up myself, and yeah, there's a hill to climb, but we'll get there. We're in good order to get there, there's no doubt about that. I do have some small concerns. I think, what do we call it now? Pingdemic or whatever. Whether that will impact on the workload of Melton Borough Council, on the staff and providing the services. But of course, we're all in that net, shall we say. Now, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Brown's got a comment at these.
Yeah, just a comment, Chair. Yeah, just to say that, yeah, take on board exactly what colleague Councillor de Boer says, but I have to say I probably have every confidence in our staffing that they will rise the challenge. And in my short time that I've been in the new portfolio role, it's quite clear to see that there's lots of plans in place, there's a lot of mitigations in place, and it's absolutely right that waiting for that business plan to come through as to what the expenditure will need to be against the stock that we have. But it's reassuring that the officers are aware of what those risks will be, and they will mitigate for that. And we as a team, I think, will work together to ensure that we deliver the best possible council housing stock. And the one thing that's really pleasing is that in September we have a development manager starting, and we'll actually look at hopefully increasing our housing stock and doing what other councils are doing across the country. But working in that sector, I'm quite aware that we all face similar challenges, but working with government, Homes England, etc., I think we can overcome them. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brown, for those positive comments. Any further comments? No, I ask Councillor Burl's proposed 2-1. I've seconded it. I turn to you to raise your hands in favour. That's unanimous. Please, Catherine. Moving on to item 6, Treasury Management Annual Report. I turn to Mrs. Garden, Director for Corporate Services, to summarise the report, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So the highlights are picked out in the covering report with a lot of detail in the appendix. The key areas for members to note are that no new borrowing was undertaken in the year, and that the borrowing remains within our statutory borrowing limit. You'll see that the investment return for the year was a disappointing 0.81%, which is a further decline over 2019-20. Which was at 1.25%, but that's to be expected in the circumstances with the extremely low base rate of 0.1%. The council's property fund has also shown a fall in valuation. The investment portfolio has continued to incorporate more diversification in terms of both counterparty and maturity. And as interest rates are currently at low levels, given the impact of COVID, it's not a good time anyway to be locking funds into very long-term investments through standard bank deposits, and therefore the portfolio does not extend beyond 12 months currently. The report will go on to Council for approval under the Prudential Code requirements, with Cabinet performing the scrutiny function. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Garden. I turn to Councillor de Burgh, Portfolio Holder for Corporate Governance, Finance, Resources, to move the recommendation and provide any further information. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's impacting on investment rates and returns. I'm pleased to report that to balance this more, as Dawn has already pointed out, more diversity is being introduced into the portfolio. However, with such uncertainty, it does mean that the long-term investments, aside from the property fund in the past, and it should be noted that the current crisis is affecting these, and hopefully these will start to recover. But should that not be the case, it demonstrates the prudence of our actions with the set aside monies that the council approved in 2021 to mitigate just such a risk. I'm happy to move on the recommendations, Leader, of this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burl. I'm very happy to second 2122 as well. Just make a note of the inflation. Bank of England base rate remained low at 0.1, certainly has. I just wonder where inflation is going, because I know of, certainly in the building industry, if you look at ballast, and this is what the county council were telling me only yesterday, inflation's running at 8% when it comes to stone and stuff like that. And so it just doesn't seem to be feeding through to the figures at this moment in time, but at some point it surely will. But yeah, just support you. We're in safe hands, Councillor de Burgh, whilst you're there as our Chancellor. So thank you very much for that. So very pleased to second. Now, are there any further comments? Okay, so Councillor de Burgh has moved 2122. I've seconded it. All those in favour, raise their hands, please. I think that's unanimous, please, Catherine. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 7, General Fund Revenue and Capital Outturn 2020-21. Turn to Mrs. Garden, Director for Corporate Services, to summarise the report, please.
Yes, thank you, leaders. So quite a detailed report here. Just to update you on where we are with the accounts for 2020-21, and we're still finalising these, and we've yet to be notified of the date of the audit. The regulations require the accounts to be published by a later date of the 30th of September this year due to the problems in the audit market. However, we have been put on notice by our external auditors that they will have difficulty in meeting these later dates. And this may mean that the accounts might not go to the Audit and Standard Committee on the 28th of September as intended. So I am keeping the chair of that committee briefed on that position. So like with the housing revenue account, the report sets out that the provisional position, not the final position, and that's subject to audit. And special expenses. You'll see in the report you get a comparison with the provisional outturn to both the original budget set in February 2020 when council tax was set and also the updated budget for supplementary estimates and carry forwards. If you look in the table in paragraph 4.1.1, and after allowing for the movement on the reserves and the amounts approved under delegation to the portfolio holder that have been carried forward into the new year, there's a surplus on the general expenses of £162,000, and it's recommended that this surplus is carried forward into 2021-22 and added to the COVID contingency budget. And this is due to the ongoing pressure and uncertainty regarding general expenses budget for this current year, caused by the potential impact of COVID that's still ongoing, primarily reduced income levels, but also the subsidy of the leisure service, which is yet to get back up to full speed following the extension to the restrictions. The government's income support scheme ended at the end of June 2021, and income levels are still lower than pre-COVID in some areas. And as I say, the extension to the restrictions into July has not helped with this recovery. We also have in the year the pressure from the pay award with a current offer of 1.5% from the employers, which was not budgeted for and was a key risk highlighted when the budget was set. So carrying forward in line with the recommendation, this additional amount will enable there to be full flexibility to respond to these areas of need. The primary reason for the healthy year-end position as reported in the report, if underspends are carried forward into 2021-22, is due to the significant budget reductions which were identified early in the 2020 financial year, and that was a result of the pressures of COVID prior to us knowing what that additional central government support was. And those reductions totaled 467,000, and that's what's contributed to that underspend. We undertook a full review of budgets, if members will recall, to identify savings to help mitigate that financial impact and ensure that the immediate risk to the council's finances was addressed. And this resulted in a number of budget reductions which were ring-fenced to help meet those funding pressures. As the financial year progressed, the government became aware of the financial impact on councils and additional funding was provided. This uncertainty regarding financial support and the pressure on services as a result has caused a backlog of work in some service areas, which where possible is being addressed through new burdens funding that's been provided. You'll see a separate table setting out the financial impact in 2021 of the pandemic in the report in paragraph 4.2.2, and I stress this is the impact of the pandemic on the 2021 financial year, as of course there was a small amount in 1920 and there continues to be an impact in 21-22. Appendix A provides more detail of the performance of budget holders on those budgets under their control, and it excludes internal recharges. And you'll see, as with the housing revenue account, explanations are provided for any variations plus or minus £10,000. For special expenses, Melton Mowbray, the surplus for the year is 19,000 after allowing for approved carried forwards into the current financial year. And again, this is summarised in the table in paragraph 4.3.1. You'll see the impact of the provisional outturn on the key unallocated reserves, and that's set out in paragraph 4.4.1. And this shows that as a result of lower spend, that there has been no need to draw on the corporate priorities reserve as originally intended to meet non-recurring expenditure. A likely underspend was reported to members in February 2021 when the 21-22 budget was set, and this leaves the reserves in a healthier position than was anticipated. And this is good news for the council, as we are financially vulnerable due to our low level of reserves, and when considered against the future financial uncertainty it faces as a result of future funding pressures, as set out in the MTFS, this is much welcome news. A financial sustainability plan is being developed and will be presented to members later this year. You'll also see in the report information on capital progress, and there is also a large amount of spend approved by the portfolio holder under delegation to be carried forward into the current financial year. Happy to answer any questions, Leader.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Garton. I turn to Ronnie, I presume. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you again to Director for Corporate Services for that report. It is a very busy report, this one. There are so many things involved in it that often we don't have to consider all the sacrifices that have been made and all the work that's been done by budget holders in particular, restrained by them in terms of searching their souls to release funds, because quite honestly, without it, I think we would have been in quite a difficult position. Anyway, despite the great financial uncertainty during the year as a result of the COVID pandemic, we've managed to end the year, as Dawn has said, in a more financially healthy position than when we set the budget and when the implications of COVID started to emerge. However, we must not forget that to achieve this, we've had to strip over £450,000 of savings from the budget. And they are referred to within the area of 412 right the way through to 4115. So there are quite the 3 pages of background to all of that. This, okay, and to the right, and savings from the budget. And until government support was known, our financial resilience was tested to its limit. This highlighted how low the council's reserves are and how quickly these could be exhausted in a crisis. Yes, we rose to the challenge and managed this well, but we must not forget we're still in very uncertain times in relation to our main revenue streams, and we don't know how smaller businesses are going to fare, and specifically how individuals will cope when the central government support network currently being phased out starts to bite later in the year. More crucially, we do not know what the outcome of the government's review into how local councils are financed, as Dawn reported, will be, and what the impact on this council is likely to mean. So we really need to have to keep very much aware on this one. Our finances are in a precarious state. We need to continue to exercise patience and restraint with regard to our finances until we are more certain of our financial future. As we develop our financial sustainability plans, we need to think about what savings in terms of income could be generated to replace that lost or fund new priorities. And also, if the worst came to the worst, what services are lower priority, and we would be prepared to reduce, to stop altogether to save costs. This will not be palatable, but we need to be prepared. Leader, I'm happy with the report. It's a very comprehensive report.
Thank you very much. I'll second that. Are there any comments at all? So, Lee, understand you're abstaining. Yeah, okay. So all those in favour, other than Councillor Higgins, raise their hands. Okay, unanimous. So Councillor Higgins will be voting from papers from now on. I've explained to our colleagues why you're late, and they do fully understand. And for those members of the public who are watching and may think Councillor Higgins' dress is more relaxed than some, he has very good reason for that position he's in. Now, just remind me, we're moving on to paper 8, is it now? Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we move on to the corporate performance and progress report for Q4. Director for Corporate Services to summarise the report, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So this is the report on the final quarter, so the full year of corporate performance, and also includes the position on complaints as well, so that you can compare performance and complaints at the same time. It has gone to scrutiny committee as well last week for their comments, and I understand there's been some information circulated relating to the comments that they've made. There's quite a comprehensive detail in the appendix setting out what the performance is for previous quarters, so comparison can be made, along with some commentary as well on some of those indicators, and the report summarised some of the areas that members will wish to focus on. There's also in the report commentary on the key activities and projects that are contained within the corporate strategy. Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much for that, Dawn. I'm very happy to move the recommendation at 2.1 to note the report effectively. You're right, it's a very, very busy report. There's no doubt about it when I first read it, which was this morning. And I was quite taken back by the amount that's going on, to be honest. If you just go to the focus areas, here we are on page 103, community safety partnership, temporary accommodation, place-led plan, project group. It just goes on and on. Priority 1 projects, activities, awful lot of going on. For a small council, we do punch above our weight. I know it's a phrase we often use, but it is so true. There's no doubt about that. To me, it's important, and I'm sure to all of us, we've got to continue delivering growth to Melton. Yesterday's news at the County Council was a great step in that direction, and that will help the sustainability and the inclusive growth in Melton. But then we go on to the implementation of planning review update. That's important to my heart as well. And we did approve the actions of that and resources. So an awful lot going on. So very pleased to know that. I do look for a seconder for this report. Councillor de Boer, are there any questions at all or any comments? If not, we'll move straight to the vote. All those in favour, please raise their hand. Unanimous. Catherine, thank you very much. We move on to item 9, 2020-21 5-year housing land supply and housing trajectory. So I turn to the Assistant Director for Planning and Delivery to summarise the report. Have some music playing when you walk into the chair, Jim.
Okay, Leader, shall I begin? Thank you. Okay, the 5-year land supply. So this is the report. I think you'll remember, those of you who've been with us for a while remember, it was introduced about 3 years ago by the MPPF, of basically the annual count of housing completions and the annual review of permissions, allocations in place that make up our future supply and how they're measured for the purposes required in the planning system. Increasingly intricate, and this year with a taste of EU exit and Brexit thrown in to add another layer of complexity. don't like to make our lives easy. We've homed in on that point and approached developers about the impact that those two factors have had in the year gone by. I'll comment on that in a moment, along with the other details. The recommendation asks you to note these results and then to agree to us publishing the full report, which is comprised as Appendix A. If I can draw out the main sort of highlights and findings on the 5-year land supply. So taking into account all those intricacies of what you need to include, what you need to discount and so on, we have concluded that the land supply position in Melton is 11.6 years. That's pitched against a minimum requirement of 5, so really quite a healthy position, better than years in the past. However, we're very conscious we've not been challenged on this for a good time now, not since the local plan was adopted, indeed a bit further back than that from my memory. So we have stress tested this against a number of scenarios, and you can see those mapped out in the graph, paragraphs 5.2.4. And the good news that comes from that is that even in the worst possible case scenario, and that really is everything that could possibly go wrong, goes wrong, we still find ourselves at a position not in the danger zone of being below or even close to 5. So it reinforces the strength of the position that we're in. On the housing delivery test, which is a measure of actual completions in the past against the needs required for those years, the last 3 years. This is, or can be, of equal importance to the 5-year land supply, because if you fall below a certain level on this test as well, you also find yourself in trouble in terms of the currency of your local plan and the way decisions have to be made. So applying that to the last 3 years, as we have to for this mechanism, we find ourselves with a result of 175%. The threshold on this test is 85%. And again, those of you with a good memory will remember that's exactly where we landed a couple of years ago, but we've recovered well with 2 strong years of delivery, basically. Just a footnote to that, this game doesn't get any easier because the calculation this year has been aided and abetted by us being in the lower echelons of our stepped housing requirement, the figure of 170. That jumps up from to 245 now. So the bar is literally raised when we do this calculation next year and the years ahead. So no room for complacency, I would suggest. And finally, on COVID and EU, you'll see that the report explains how we've approached the development industry and asked them directly what kind of impacts it's had. I think it's with surprise that they've reported back really quite limited. And in statistical terms, that works out at about 5%. And that's reflected in that this year's final delivery figure was about 5% lower than last year's. So their anecdote is being supported by the stats. And with that, I just invite you to move the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Jim. I turn to Councillor Higgins, Portfolio Holder for Growth and Prosperity, to move the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm very happy to move the recommendation. And I think it's a very positive report from the portfolio. In as much so, as you would know yourself, Leader, when you're talking to parish councils, is parish councils have always feared not having the 5-year land supply at Melton because it opens up where they see it as the rural villages again. And I think through all that work that happened, well, I've been elected since 2015, and I would say some of this work is coming to fruition from those early years there. And I'd like to thank also all councillors, some who've now departed from the council, but those who took the mantle on to deal with this, getting the local plan. It's been so important. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the town councillors of working together on the sustainable neighbourhoods, and that's going to be really important. Just turning to the recommendations, I think it's really interesting to note that the minimum, it's not just the minimum has been met, but has significantly been met. And I think we were challenging ourselves a few years ago. Would we get to near 245, and I don't see why not now, when you're looking at the history of how Melton's delivered it. I think it's important the service is improved for developers as well as communities, to make sure that that dialogue works through as quickly as possible, to reduce any objections where necessary, or to mitigate them for those communities. Turning to page 130 in your packs, I think the figure there sort of really outlines it. So whichever scenario you're looking at, the very minimum, we're 7 years, which is 2 years above the 5-year land supply. But as Mr. Worley has said, you know, we're significantly meeting all those on those tests, and we're not getting too close to that 5-year land supply on all the other measures of scenarios. One table I'd like to bring members' attention to, that of the Cabinet, but all those involved of this council, is page 155. And if any parish councils are looking, I think it's really, really important. You start to see the Melton Mowbray Sustainable Neighbourhoods coming online from now. And early on in the life of the plan, a lot of housing was going to the rural areas. And I do remember Christine Marshall always saying it will be the rural areas first until we can get the sustainable neighbourhoods on. And she was saying back in 2015, that's going to be 5 to 7 years away. So now we're coming up to that crux where we are delivering on our sustainable neighbourhoods in Melton Mowbray, and you can start to see that ramp up and take the pressure off. So we don't need to have unallocated sites in the rural areas or unsustainable development happening, and you see it all tailing off. And just two different stats which I think is really interesting. If you look at the large sites with planning permission which aren't allocated, small sites with planning permission not allocated, and windfall sites from year 4 onwards, that equates to 1,225 houses. Now those of houses with planning permission, or 29 houses per year on windfall, that represents 20% of the housing target of 6,125. So that's a huge amount that we've already found already. So we've been masters of our own destiny here. And I would say, leader, as I sum up here, is we've got a very sustainable plan here. It's now time for the town to take their sustainable neighbourhoods forward, delivering those houses. But those houses that we found before has given us a very great buffer of at least 20% of those with planning permissions which haven't been allocated before, which we can rely on in the next couple of years as we get those houses online.
Thank you very much, Councillor Higgins. I'm happy to second 212223. Just like to point out 541, council in a positive position. It certainly is, isn't it, Jim? Yeah, if you look at like I say, 7 years on scenario B1 and up to 12.7 on scenario C1. I never dreamt it would happen actually, but we got there. So a lot of thanks goes to the planners and the planning department, and also the planning committee as well, who took decisions earlier on. And as Councillor Higgins said, obviously we move on to the sustainable neighbourhoods now on the outskirts of town. Now, are there any other comments to be made? Councillor Jones, Freya.
Thanks, leader. I'm just it's a really thorough report, and it's brilliant, very positive. It's nice to have positive reports coming to cabinet. Just to a small mention about the environmental and climate change implications, because I know we're working a lot on that at the moment, and it's quite a high priority. So really positive to see that referenced in this report as well, and look forward to seeing where we go with that and how it incorporates into all of our council services as well as the housing. Thank you.
Very important point, Councillor Freer. Any other comments? If not, all those in favour of 212223, raise their hands. Unanimous, please, Catherine. Thank you very much. We now move on to the very last paper, which is item agenda 10, the draft developer contribution supplementary planning document. The Chief Executive is just going to say a few words here before I hand over to the Assistant Director for Planning and Delivery.
Thank you, Leader, and perhaps just to reflect on some of the points that was just been made by yourself and the Deputy Leader about the wider context of growth before Jim picks up some of the the technical aspects in this report. So as you'll be aware, within our corporate strategy, we've made helping to secure the Melton Mowbray Distributor Road as one of our key priorities. And yesterday, the County Council's Cabinet signalled their intention to accept the Housing Infrastructure Fund grant for the southern leg of that road at their meeting on the 17th of September, subject to a number of conditions being met. Now, ultimately, securing the Housing Infrastructure Fund requires an agreement between the County Council and Homes England, but Melton Borough Council has been working to support the County Council to ensure this can be achieved and the financial risks involved mitigated. The Developer Contributions SPD before you this afternoon represents a formal demonstration of that commitment and the first step towards meeting one of those conditions. And subject to Cabinet's consideration this afternoon, statutory consultation would commence on the SPD with a view to bringing it back to Cabinet and Council for adoption in September. Alongside the SPD, we are also working to adopt new and refreshed master plans for the north and south neighbourhoods, respectively, and obviously just referred to by the Deputy Leader a moment ago. And we're also looking to establish an agreement with the County Council on underwriting any shortfall arising from developer contributions, arising from matters within our control, and up to a cap of 1.75 million, which is a change from the 1 million cap previously agreed in December 2020. These items will be considered as part of separate reports to Cabinet and Council, and the specific timings for concluding those are still being finalised, but we certainly expect to have that achieved by the end of 2021, which is something that the County Council have requested of us as part of them entering the Housing Infrastructure Funding Grant Agreement. Now at that point, Leader, I'll hand over to the Assistant Director to speak to the specifics of this report and the technical aspects arising from it as well. Thank you.
Sorry. The true technical point associated with this paper is to understand that an SPD must build upon local plan policy. It can't be new policy in its own right. Beyond that, the complexity is within the content. This, of course, builds upon the IN policies in the local plan, which are all about key infrastructure to allow the growth we've just been discussing to come forward and to continue. The main thrust of the report and the SPD, which is attached, draft SPD, which is attached as Appendix 1, is the way that we will negotiate in those rare circumstances where negotiation is justified. It bears repeating that we expect development to meet all of its infrastructure requirements off its own bat and really regard these circumstances to come forward really quite infrequently. Members, of course, will be familiar with our track record of 99% success rate, over 99% success rate of securing contributions in the last 5 years or so. The heart of that aspect lies at the table at paragraph 5.8 of the report, which also appears in the draft SPD document itself, which sets out our priorities. Top of the table, as the Chief Exec was just describing, is the absolutely key infrastructure of the highways and the schools, which is hard to imagine could ever be negotiated away, because without it, how can development even happen? Other categories within that table present our strategic replicate our strategic priorities and the corporate plan on quite a wide range of issues. But the report introduces new for us territory in terms of local priorities, which have been decided by ward members working with their local communities to identify what's important to them at the very local level, ward level, and even parish level in some circumstances. The recommendation asks you to accept this draft SPD document as comprised in Appendix A for the purposes of consultation. The intention being to report back the responses and a final version for adoption via recommendation to Council, as the Chief Exec has mentioned, in September.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jim. As most of you know, I was at the County Council meeting yesterday, and it was very pleasing for me as leader of this council to say that today we would be discussing the SPD, because as we know, it's one of their requests to have an SPD that's strong, and in spite of our record that Jim's already mentioned, which is, I suspect and I genuinely believe is the best in the county for delivering on the 106s. So it's very comforting for me to say that yesterday, actually. There isn't a lot more I can say on this paper, because obviously with the introduction from Ed and quite a detailed summary from Jim, there's an awful lot being said. But it is important, Jim has already mentioned on page 170, the table at 5.8, the priorities that we'll be looking at, and obviously strategic highways infrastructure will be, and education will take priority 1, priority 2A, affordable housing, local highway infrastructure, traffic calming, etc., monitoring, and then the table goes on. We have entered into the principle of an agreement with the county council, and obviously we've got to get this right, full stop, because as the chief executive, we could be held responsible for anything that's our fault up to the tune of 1.75 million. So we really have to get this one right. So I'm very happy to propose the recommendations at 2122. Obviously this consultation launched on Monday, I believe. And yeah, and then it finishes on September the 8th, did you say earlier? Yeah. So obviously try and get as many people engaged in that as possible, and then it will come back to us for a decision following all that. Are there any, Councillor Higgins wants to make a comment?
Well, I was happy to second it, but I can make a comment while I'm seconding. But yeah, I think, as you say, I think it's really pleasing with how everything's moving forward. Meltham won't grow without the strategic highways infrastructure, and you always need a good education to start off in life, because that just makes everything a lot easier for people. Great to see primary care in there, and our commitment for a second doctor's surgery, which you're championing as well, leader. But while it is very small for those communities, I think it is nice actually to see the local community infrastructure priorities for those communities. Not all of those communities have neighbourhood plans, so but it will allow communities to know what we're actually aiming for. So development can come with benefits as well, and it's important for those to all consult, leader. I think it's a fabulous document, and look forward to working with all partners on it.
We'll get the consultation over, then we'll work it. But you seconded it, yep. Okay, is there any other comments to be made? No. Okay, I've already moved to 122. All in favour? Unanimous, Catherine. So thank you very much. That's approved. So that finishes today's cabinet meeting. I don't believe there's any other items at all on the agenda. So to all of you here, thank you for attending, and to anyone listening, thank you for listening. Thank you.